Hi, welcome to Beyond Politics. I'm Catherine Clark. Chief Justice Beverley McLachlin is the first female Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada. She is also widely respected in legal circles for her intellect, her collegiality, and her leadership skills. Chief Justice Beverley McLachlin joins me now to talk about her path from a small town in the foothills of Alberta to the top court in the land. Chief Justice Beverley McLachlin, welcome to Beyond Politics. It is great to have you here.
Wonderful to be here.
We've talked to a lot of people who talk about your incredible ability at building a sense of collegiality here on the court. But one of the other things we've heard is that you have a terrific sense of humor.
Oh, I hope so.
I
think all the judges have a good sense of humor. When we go on breaks, when we're hearing a case, we'll go into our coffee room and we often have lots and lots of laughs, and not at counsel's expense, I have to tell you, but just about different things, because you have all of the judges have great senses of humor, and it's a way of relieving tension. It's a way of just being collegial with each other, and so we actually have quite a bit of fun.
Is it a very tense job, being Chief Justice? Or just being a justice?
Yeah, I think it is. I think tension's always a difficult thing to really say. Is it very tense, less tense?
Sure.
You know, one learns to handle whatever tension you can handle, and you're either good at that, or you say, maybe I should find a different line of work. I'm sure I couldn't do yours, but yes, it is, because it's the responsibility of all the decisions. That's the most important thing. I mean, you have before you the most difficult legal issues that the legal system in the country throws up, and you've got to decide them conscientiously in accordance with the law, and they're not easy. There's often two ways or more that you could go. That's why they are here, and that's why they've arrived at this point at the Supreme Court of Canada. So, and we feel the weight of that responsibility, because we know how important it is for the country and for individual Canadians. So that's the biggest source. The other subsidiary things are much less stressful, but whenever you get 8 or 9 people working together on contentious issues, there's bound to be a little tension in the air, and a little bit of that is very creative and very helpful. I think what you don't want to have is have it spiraling out of control, so that instead of contributing to the debate, it becomes a bit of a problem to getting at the right solution.
And so you laugh.
Yes, we laugh.
So you let it all out. You have come a very long way talking here about, we've just been discussing the fact that you come out of hearings here at the Supreme Court of Canada. You've come a long way from where you grew up in Pincher Creek, Alberta. How did growing up there influence who you have become today as Supreme Court Justice?
Difficult to answer, but I think, first of all, it makes to grow up in a small community, in a situation where you're expected to work and contribute to whatever's going on in the family, gives you a sense of self-reliance. You really learn that you can face adversities, you make decisions, you live with the consequences. You learn all that at a fairly early age, I think. And so I think there's a sense of self-reliance. There's a sense of willingness, understanding the importance of working and contributing that comes from growing up in a small community where everybody is judged on how they pull their weight. People who didn't pull their weight weren't so well regarded in my community. And that seeps into you from the time you are very, very small. And a sense of social responsibility, too, because everybody's got to be there for everybody else.
You also seem to have, it seemed to be a very unique community in that there was a lot of emphasis put on higher education, or a respect for education. And you also came from a home where that was very important.
That's true. And Pincher Creek is, I think, the second oldest town in Alberta, which doesn't make it terribly old by Quebec or Ontario standards, but or Nova Scotia, but it was a town with some roots and some institutions, and people had settled there who cared about books. And one of the things that I think was tremendously important to what I turned out to be was the fact that there was a local library which was run by some of the women who really believed it was important to have books there for all the kids and the adults. And you could go and borrow books, 2 books a week for
Just two.
But I had a trick.
Oh.
My brother and I worked in tandem, and he liked to read too. So we would go together to the library, and we would negotiate what selections we would have, and we would end up with each 4 books a week. When things were dull, but it was great, and we went right through the junior section by the time we were about 12 or 13, and then I remember going to the library and saying, well, could I try the adult section? And they looked rather not too sure, and then they said, oh, well, why not? And so I started taking out adult novels, and we did that. So this was great, you learned lots of new words, you learned lots of situations. So you're living in a small town, but you're seeing the world, really.
Had you read almost every book in the library by the time you left?
There were some that didn't intrigue me that much, but I'd read a lot of them.
I bet you had. You were the eldest of 5, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Did that confer its own set of responsibilities on you, or expectations, I suppose?
Well, my younger brothers would say that I put the expectations on them, but I suppose being an eldest child must do something. We all know the studies and so on, and I think I got a little more spoiled than my younger siblings because my parents were, of course, the first. I was the first child, so they were very invested in teaching me things and so on. And
sure.
Then as other children came along and things got busier, then I was more on my own. But I think I benefited from that, and I was expected to take some responsibility, yeah.
Your mom had wanted to be a writer,
mm-hmm.
and I think it's somewhat ironic that you are now in a position where you are writing
mm-hmm.
Judgments that are not only read by so many, but have such a tremendous impact
mm-hmm.
on all Canadians.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever stop to think about that?
Yeah, I do. I think writing is one of the things I like to do the most. History will judge whether I'm good at it or not, but I get a huge pleasure out of just finding the right word, trying to make a sentence flow, trying to make a judgment as clear as I can make it. I've always felt as a judge that it was my responsibility to honestly set out why, as a trial judge, which I was for many years, what facts I had found, and then what principles of law I was going on, so that when I was on the lower courts, there would be a record to go to appeal. And I still maintain the same approach in this job. I think the public's entitled to the clearest, best thought out judgment, best written judgment that the judge can produce. Sometimes I disappoint myself, but that's an ideal that I strive to meet.
What do you mean that you disappoint yourself?
Well, I might look over a judgment, I'll sit in court and somebody will say, well, here's this judgment you wrote 5 years ago, and I'm looking at a paragraph and I say, well, I could have said that a bit better. But on the whole, I think, I'm viewed as writing fairly clearly and in a straightforward, accessible fashion, which is what I want. I mean, you write in accordance with the needs of the genre, and I think good writing, good judicial writing, is clear writing, writing that explains in a concise way, and in an intellectually honest way by reference to authority, so it can become quite academic way why the judge has arrived at their decision, and in a way that will allow that case to stand for a proposition that can be cited in future cases, which we lawyers call precedential value.
When did you, or where, I suppose, did you learn your writing?
All through my life.
Okay, so it was just something that you did.
I liked doing it in high school, but I wouldn't say I was a particularly good writer. I learned in university when I did philosophy how to put ideas together, and I had some excellent philosophy professors who would not accept sloppiness and basically taught me that you had to move from proposition A to proposition B to proposition C, maybe to a conclusion, the different forms of reasoning, syllogistic, etc. And that helped me a lot to clean up my act, as I might say, and become a clearer writer.
Was it always a given that you would study law?
No, not at all. I really didn't know what I would do when I graduated from high school. I enjoyed my studies, and so I thought I would just go into arts. And fortunately, I had good enough marks that I was able to go on scholarship and so on. At that time, I think it was easier than it is now, at least in Alberta. And I went to university, I went to the Faculty of Arts, and my idea was just, I thought there was so much out there in the world to learn. I've always been very curious, and I felt I wanted to learn about art and literature and music and all sorts of other things that I didn't know about, history. So I tried to soak up as much of that as I could, and then when I got toward the end of my first degree, I said, well, at some point, this wonderful adventure of ideas has to end, and I have to actually
get a job.
So I was home for the summer, and I thought maybe law. A friend of mine said, you might enjoy law. I hadn't thought about it, and I wrote to the dean of the Faculty of Law, a legendary character named Wilbur Bowker, and I didn't know him, but I just wrote a letter, Faculty of Law, University of Alberta, and I said, could you send me some information on law school? He wrote back by return post and said, you're accepted. So when the time came, I went, and I loved it, and I've been in the law ever since.
You describe, when you're describing yourself, you seem to be this lifelong learner. I mean, you seem to have a passion for learning. Not everyone has that.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I still read a lot of books outside the law when I can. I don't have a huge amount of time. But I've always got 2 or 3 books on the go, and I found even electronic, I get interested in something and I'll Google it, and it's amazing what you can learn so quickly. I think we're very fortunate nowadays to have all of these resources available. But I love learning, and I think most people do in some sense or other. But it's a great pleasure for me.
Tell me a little bit about what it was like being a woman at the time. Did it affect you that you didn't see many other women role models as you were embarking on your study of the law, or even when you began practicing law?
Yeah, well, it probably delayed my decision to go into law school. And when I began practicing law, I had very little confidence that I would ever achieve anything in the law. I just sort of thought, well, I'll give it my best shot. And I was really surprised when, the people I was working for in the law firm said, well, you're doing a good job. I was about 3/4 of the way through the year. I'd suffered 3/4 of the year thinking I was a total failure.
Why did you think you were a failure,
I didn't have the role models. I just didn't have the confidence.
You had no one did any
And I thought, it was tough. Women were regarded differently. So why would you assume automatically you're going to succeed? That wasn't, it was hard to build yourself up to that assumption. And then gradually, as I realized, yes, I can do this. I can do this well. I can, and I became confident. And after that, it was fine. But at the beginning, without role models, there is a certain sense of, can I really do this? That I think even if you intellectually rule it out, you say, of course, I'm just as good as a man or whatever, it nags at you like an undertow. And I suppose it's the same for people of racial minorities when they join a group, a profession or whatever. That is, there's just this little undertow that may sap a bit of the confidence at the beginning. And the role models, if you have them, help you deal with that.
You have in turn gone on to become an incredible role model yourself, and I think you are not in any way an overconfident person, but you must have taken some, pleasure in knowing that your abilities were recognized. Yeah. You had a practice, and then you became a judge. You were very young, too. When you
Yeah, I was quite surprised when they
young.
asked me whether I wanted to be a judge. I was really surprised, you know. And so...
Had anyone talked to you at all about it? Had anyone said,
no,
you should consider this?
I hadn't thought about it at all, and then at some function the Chief Justice came up to me, and he was proactively trying to promote getting a few women on the court, and he said to me, would you like to be on the court? And I said, well, I've never thought about that, and I had to do some thinking because I was only 37 at that point.
What did you need to think about?
Whether I really wanted to get on the bench at that time, because the way I viewed it, and I think the way most people view it, when you go on the bench, it's a lifelong commitment to being a judge, probably until you're 75, perhaps until you're 65. And when you're 37 and you look at all this ahead and you say, well, and also when you're a judge, there are other roads you don't take. And I said, I don't know whether I'll enjoy judging. I don't know whether I'll be a good judge. And if I'm not a good judge or don't enjoy it, it's going to be a very long time. And, of course, one could always resign, but that was very much frowned on at the time. So it was a big decision. For me, becoming a judge was a real commitment. Maybe it isn't for everybody, but it was for me. And once I got there, then I really committed myself to it, and it was wonderful. I enjoyed it more than anything else probably I've ever done. And so I continued to be a judge and still am.
What tipped the scales to have you make the decision that, yes, you would like to become a judge?
Well, I thought the work would be interesting. I thought about, I was a trial judge that I was going to be asked to be, and I thought about the day-to-day work you'd be doing. You'd be seeing people coming before you with their problems, all sorts of problems, or corporations, or governments, and they would be saying, here's our problem, you make the decision. And when I thought about that process, I thought, that would be really interesting. And you know, it was interesting. As a trial judge, I love being a trial judge. You saw, it was like a daily parade of society with all its woes and peculiarities and afflictions. You see a lot of afflictions when you're a trial judge. But every day different people, different things, and different, all tied in with legal challenges, finding the facts, applying the right principles. So it turned out to be even better than I had thought it would be.
You rose very quickly and then eventually ended up as a justice of the Supreme Court. One of the things that struck me was that at the time you had a young child, and you were both a mother to that child, you were a wife, and you had this incredibly busy career. You continue to still be a mother, and your husband, your first husband, had passed away. Yeah. But you have been married now for another over 2 decades, I think. You seem to have chosen to marry men who actively supported you.
I did. Well, I don't think I chose it that way, but I was lucky that they did. I don't think I fell in love with either of my husbands because I thought you're going to be a good support. But perhaps at some level I wouldn't have married had I not thought that. I think I was very fortunate in having 2 husbands who have been enormously supportive of my career and of me as a person.
Did you have backlash from other people that you were, so many women at the time who were attempting to forge careers and identities of their own faced such tremendous backlash for their decision to work or to carry on a career while their children were still young? Did you face that, or did you ignore it?
I guess I ignored it. I didn't. I tried to, my husband and I tried to ensure that our child was always looked after. I mean, I think every parent thinks, oh, I could have done that better, or I could have done this better. But I think we were loving and attentive parents, and I still have a wonderful relationship with my son. And so, no, I didn't feel, I mean, maybe people said things, maybe I just ignored it, I don't know. I didn't feel huge pressure. There were women around me who were doing exactly the same thing in the 70s and 80s and 90s. So I'm sure there were other people who felt that a different model might be better, but that was not available to me, or it was not the choice that I could make. So,
when you received the phone call about becoming a Justice of the Supreme Court, did you again have to take the same little bit of time to think about it?
Well, I did a little bit. Now, the process was, I knew they were looking for somebody from BC, and I knew some of the papers had mentioned my name along with 4 or 5 other names, but I didn't really expect it to happen. And at the time, I was actually on vacation with my son in Australia, and we were at a town on the East Coast called Townsville, I think, and a phone call came from the Ministry of Justice, and the person said, you're being considered to go on the Supreme Court of Canada. It's not certain, but if you were asked, would you accept? And I said, I don't know.
Did you really?
Yes, I did. I said, you have to give me some time. And there were several things that went into that. The first was that I had just lost my husband 6 months before. I had just taken on a new job. I was 6 months into it as Chief Justice of Trial Court in British Columbia, the Supreme Court of British Columbia. And it seemed a move across the country to Ottawa to a new huge job. I worried about what the impact would be on my son, who was 12 years old. Anyway,
Did you talk to him about it?
Yeah, so he said, what was that? And I told him, and he didn't say anything, and we went to bed. And in the morning, he got up and he said, Mom, you have to do it. And I thought, wow, he had thought about it. He had spent the night thinking about it, and probably not all of it. I'm sure he slept a lot of it. But in any event, in the morning, he said, very calmly, very clearly, you have to do it.
Why? Did he tell you why?
No, he just felt that it was I don't think he articulated any reasons. He just felt that that was what had to happen for us. And he approached it with great enthusiasm. He learned to love Ottawa, and he's back in Vancouver now, but he loves Ottawa, and is often back here.
That's remarkable. Was the Supreme Court what you thought it would be?
It was pretty formidable. I didn't have a clear picture of what I thought it would be. In many ways it was. I had a sense of how they went about making their decisions, but I hadn't expected the caseload. In those early years of the charter, well, I was 89. The charter came in 82, but the cases started rolling in around 84, 85, etc. We had we had a backlog problem. We had a huge caseload. We had what they called remanets, which meant that you couldn't finish all the cases in a term, and they went over to the fall, so you had this kind of escalating burden. And the court was working extremely hard, and I knew it would be a hard job, and that there would be huge amounts of reading and very difficult questions, but I was a little surprised at the actual pace of it.
I had asked you this in our first interview, but it was a really fun story, so I'm going to ask you to tell it again. You sat at the time with Bertha Wilson. What did she say to you?
Well, when I was sworn in, there's a ceremony when a new justice is sworn in. And so you go down and you take the oath, and then after you do that, you come back up to the bench. And she leaned across, she was a few down, and she leaned across and said, 3 down, 6 to go. That's because I was the third woman, and of course the court is 9. So she said, 3 down, 6 to go, in her lovely Scottish accent, which was not appreciated by everyone. There was a commentary in one of the newspapers that said, when I told that story, that said, who does the new justice think she is? Could you imagine that you could have 9 women on the Supreme Court? What a travesty. And then I didn't reply. Of course, judges don't reply to criticism. But I thought to myself, well, there were sure 9 men for a lot of years. So not that I want 9 women on the court. What I'm for is something near gender parity.
you have been described as living your life like you have a bee chasing you.
Oh, I don't know.
You do a lot of work outside the court.
Yeah, I do different things.
Do you enjoy doing it, or do you have trouble saying no?
Well, probably a little of both. But no, I wouldn't do things I didn't enjoy. And I have a lot of energy, I guess. And I'm interested in a lot of things, so I end up doing a lot of things. I really enjoy the arts. I enjoy music and painting and things like that. So to me, my life would be very austere without having contact with those communities. So I do go to symphonies and support some of the local musical communities in particular, and take some interest in the arts scene because it adds color to my life. And I mean, you only go through life once. I'm a judge for life, or a good part of it. I have to have a good life too, and I feel that it's a good thing. It gives you a balance, and I think helps you enjoy your life and get through your days, and occasionally could even bring insights or that might help you with your work.
Do you paint?
No, I'd love to, but I have never had the time or taken the time to actually learn the techniques of applying paint to paper. I do some drawing, but just on holidays and for fun.
Is it true that you like to bring the wood in from the outdoors into your cottage? Are you a task-oriented person?
Well, I do some of that. I make my husband do most of it.
Delegate.
I potter in the garden quite a bit.
Do you?
And I like doing things around the house.
Yeah.
I really do. I find it's an antidote to the highly intellectual work that I do all day. Just go home and do something in the garden, or you know, cook a meal. I love cooking. Do something like that. It's a way of relaxing.
You have several years left here on the court, but do you ever think about what kind of a legacy you would like to create for the court? Or
not a lot. I've never.
You're too busy.
Been that. I'm too busy, and it's never attracted me, this idea of thinking, well, this is going to be my legacy. Somehow I think my job is to decide each case as honestly and as well as I can. And if I were thinking about legacy, saying, you know, what will they remember me for, I might be tempted to veer off that path, and so it might somehow skew the way I approach my work. So no, I don't think in terms of legacy.
If you'd had the option to choose one other thing to do in life, what do you think it might have been?
Oh, I'd have done something in writing. Yeah, probably something. I toyed with journalism, like you, or creative writing, something like that.
Your mother would have been very proud.
Yeah.
And pleased.
I think so. I think so.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you, Catherine. It's been lovely.
Appreciate it.